Hey there, audio friends, MrAyrit here, and today we're talking about an amp that I think maybe you want to consider for your stereo setup. This is a phenomenal amp from Fosi. This is the ZA3. I've been seeing tons of great things on this, so I reached out to Fosi, asked them if they'd send me one that I could check out. Thankfully, they obliged, and we're going to dive in and look at this thing today, and then I'm going to tell you kind of what my initial impressions are and what my plans are for the future of this amp, because it's good, and I'm going to keep it and play with it for a while. So let's dig in. Alright, so first off, let's talk about a few specs of the Fosi ZA3 here. One of the things that you should know first is that it's based on the Texas Instruments, let me get this right, TPA3255 chip, which is, you know, as somebody who's more of a headphone person, I don't know as much about stereo amplification and kind of the architecture and all that stuff of it, but it seems to be, after doing some research, like this is just a really phenomenal chip, right, that is known for being clean and just, you know, it's a really good amp chip, right? So obviously this is an op-amp-based amplifier, so along with the TPA3255 chipset that kind of runs the whole thing, there's also a ton of op amps that you can switch out in this thing. Like there's op amps for the XLRs, there's op amps for just the regular left and right channel, there's op amps for the subwoofer output. So there's just tons of op amps that you could play with, which we'll talk about later. Okay, power wise, you've got also some options here where it comes with a couple of power supply choices. So you can either go with, again, let me make sure I get this right, a 32 volt 5 amp power supply, which in stereo can give you 95 watts per channel at 4 ohm, 50 watts per channel at 8 ohm. That's rated power, and then max power of close to double that, okay? And then in mono mode, because this amp is and can be switched from stereo to mono, it's 110 watts for 4 ohms and 55 watts for 8 ohms, and then max power is higher than that. So you've got, you know, I like how they give you the spread here, and then they've got the 48 volt 5 amp option for the power supply, which is the one that I've got, and with that it's rated at 180 watts for 4 ohms, and then 95 watts at 8 ohms in stereo mode, and then in mono mode 235 watts for 4 ohm and 120 watts for 8 ohm, and again, that's the rated power, not the max power, which is, you know, a little bit higher than that. And it says at 1 kilohertz with those power ratings, you can expect a THD of about 1%. So I really like this about this amplifier, that you can run it mono, you can run it stereo, you can get a baseline power supply, or you can get an upgraded power supply. It's just, you can do a lot with it, which is why this is going to be the first of several videos about this amplifier. The first here just being kind of an initial review impressions video, and then the laters we'll look at running them in mono, and then we'll look at op amp swapping and all sorts of stuff. So lots of fun things to come here. But let's look at the unit here. Let's talk about just kind of like everyday use for it, how I've been getting along with it in my system, and then we'll talk about obviously the sound. Okay, so I think this is a rather good looking unit, personally. I mean, you've got kind of the basic, it's not, I wouldn't call it black, like it's almost like a very dark gray, like a charcoaly color is what I would say. And then obviously you've got this orange volume knob, which seems to be a thing these days with Fosi stuff, so I don't know. Knob feel is mediocre at best, but the deal is like, unless this is sitting on your desk, you're probably going to be controlling your volume with a remote to your DAC. At least that's how I'm doing it, right? Because I've got this running my kind of like home theater media speakers at this point in time. The button is a clickable button. That's how you turn it on, just so you know that. And then you've got a toggle for XLR RCA, and then you got a toggle for mono stereo on the front as well. So it's a pretty clean looking. I think it looks nice. You can see you've got some heat dissipation on the side here. It's got orange accents on the inside of it. And then around on the back is where this amp is maybe a little bit more robust than kind of your typical cheap Hi-Fi amplifiers. mainly because you do have the XLR inputs along with the RCA. You've got a subwoofer out that's an RCA, and then you've got your binding posts, which are okay, and a 12-volt trigger input, and then your power supply input there. So, and that's pretty much it, right? This is a power amplifier, not a DAC, doesn't do any streaming or anything like that. This is just to provide your speakers with power. So I think it looks nice. I think it feels nice. I don't have any complaints about the build or setup or any of that. When I've been running it in my system, I've had the volume maxed out, and I just leave it there, and then I just control the volume with my remote, which for me, I'm using for my DAC a Soundcause SGD1 in my home entertainment system down here in the basement. So I've got no complaints build-wise. I like that you get the XLR inputs as well as the RCA inputs, and I definitely like that you've got the subwoofer out, so that's an option as well. I don't use the 12-volt trigger, but I would imagine that that's a nice little touch for people that need it as well. Okay, so let's go sit out where I do my listening, and we'll talk a little more about the sound. Okay, so we've looked at the amp, and we've talked about the specs, and we've done all that, but let's talk about sound. So I'm sitting out here in my my basement. This is where I do most of my listening. I've got the fosi ZA3 is hooked up to a pair of Emotiva T0 Plus tower speakers, and then it's running a Yamo C10 powered sub, and it's running also a 12-inch passive sub that's powered by an IEMA A07, and that's my current stereo listening setup down here. And I have to say, it sounds phenomenal. Like, honestly, like way better than any home theater stereo that I've heard in someone's house in the past. Okay, so what do I like about the ZA3? It's just a clean amplifier. Like, it just is clean. And I think it's got a level of clarity that I don't feel like I've really experienced with speakers up to this point. Now, previously I was using a fosi HDA1 amplifier, and I just happened to be using these fosi amps just because they're just a reasonable price, and like they seem good bang for buck, and people recommend them. The ZA3 here, fosi sent to me, but that was solicited by me because I saw so many good things about it. Okay, so it maybe is a touch on the cooler side, I would say. If anything I would change about it, it would be add like a touch of warmth to it, and I think it would really meet my preferences very, very well with these Emotiva speakers. But regardless, it's a very linear amp. It sounds fantastic. Lots of detail, lots of clarity, good separation, puts a great image out with the right speaker. You can't ask an amp, $130, $150 amp if you get the bigger power supply like I have. You can't ask an amp to do any more than this amp is doing, I don't think. And truth be told is I like it so much that I actually bought one for myself too, so I can run mono setup here. So I've got a couple more videos that'll be coming on ZA3s. One is going to be op amp based, right? So I've never played with switching op amps. That's something that I'm going to do with the ZA3 here, and I've at least got a couple lined up. But hopefully I can line up a couple more, of the more popular ones, so I can do a fair comparison and a pretty comprehensive comparison with that. And then I'll also talk about the difference between running, mono versus running, just a single amplifier, and we'll see what kind of differences are there. So really, this is just my evolution of my system down here in my basement. And I'm just going to take you along for the ride and share my experiences with it. But initial impression of the fosi ZA3 is very positive. I think it's a very solid amp choice, as long as you don't mind it being, pretty linear and clean, not looking, it's definitely not on the warm side, right? But maybe we can fix that with some op amps, and then it's going to be, I don't know, pretty darn close to perfect for my needs anyway. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one.